Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is at long last coming to the end of its very long lifespan, and with Mario Kart World coming out in June and my own driving test also happening sometime this summer, that kinda got me thinking, out of all the 96 tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which one would I most want to take my driving test on? So off the bat, we're going to lay down some ground rules. So a lot of the tracks are just impossible or would kill you to drive on, so I'm going to separate these into different categories and we're just going to rapid fire through them. So some rules for the categories first. Some courses could fall into multiple categories for why they're being disqualified, so my logic is as follows. Starting from the very start of the racetrack, whatever the first obstacle would be, will be the reason for disqualification. So for example, Mario Kart Stadium could be disqualified for both being impossible with a giant sideways anti-gravity section that no real car is driving up, but also for huge safety hazards as you fly off the track at the very end and real cars can't fly. But because the anti-gravity section comes first and he wouldn't even make it to the glider section in a real car, this will be in the impossible category as opposed to the highly dangerous category. Also, if a route is optional, it won't be considered. So, for example, in Bone Dry Dunes, you can choose to drive up this wall, but you don't have to. However, you have no choice but to take this glider ramp after on either path you choose, so you are going to die. One final rule, and this mainly applies to tour tracks with a couple of exceptions, is that I will only be considering the first lap of the course. So if you can safely drive around the first lap of the course, but the second and third lap is absolute hell, that will not count. You only need one lap, the first lap specifically, to be eligible to qualify. So with all that preamble out of the way, let's just get straight into disqualifying some of the courses, and then we can get down to the really interesting ones. Tracks with walls you couldn't drive up. Mario Kart Stadium, Twisted Mansion, Dragon Driftway, Mute City, and Wild Woods. Tracks with walls that you would fall off and die. So this is slightly different from the first category because the first category is like walls going up, so a car wouldn't physically be able to drive up them. But on tracks with walls you would fall off and die, these are typically you're driving and the track will kind of tilt into a wall, so you'd be able to drive it, but eventually your car would lose traction and you would fall off and die. So the courses in this category, there's not too many either, but they're Wario's Gold Mine, Ice Ice Outpost, Big Blue, Shy Guy Falls, and Mario Circuit, the Wii U version. So the next category is tracks that you must go underwater, and there's only 4 in here, I suppose, because of the rule that the first obstacle is what disqualifies you. That just means that there's less in this category, but there's only 4, so I'll go through them quickly. Piranha Plant's Cove, you just start the race underwater. Dolphin Shoals, basically the whole track takes place underwater. Your car would have broken down before you even got in it to begin your test. Piranha Plant Pipeway, so there is 2 jumps at the start of this track, but they feel like pretty small jumps to me, so I'll let that slide. However, the majority of the course takes place underwater, so you're not getting away with that. Squeaky Clean Sprint. I actually thought that this would be disqualified immediately as you drive into a sink, but you can actually kind of go around the edge of the sink to get around that, but there's no getting around the bathtub you have to drive into later, so this will be disqualified for being underwater as well. The next category is for tracks that would just fucking kill you. Like, you could do your driving test on these tracks, but you wouldn't be worried about getting your license, you would be worried about living. So this is by far the biggest category. I believe there's 29 tracks in this category, so we are going to rapid fire through them. And if there's any ones in particular that stand out to me, I'm going to mention them, but other than that, we'll just go straight through them. Water Park, Sunshine Airport, Mount Wario, because you jump out of the helicopter, before the track even starts, you're just fucking dead. Cloudtop Cruise, DK Jungle, Wario Stadium, Melody Motorway, Donut Plains, which I was actually going to let this one slide if this bridge wasn't broken, but because the bridge is broken, you would drive straight into the water and most likely die. Grumble Volcano, Cheeseland, Ribbon Road, Paris Promenade, which has a glider ramp at the start, but if you weren't able to take that glider ramp, it would just be a small drop, so I'm letting that slide, but there's a big drop right after it that would kill you, so it gets disqualified for that. Sky Garden, Ninja Hideaway, Mushroom Gorge, Merry Mountain, Riverside Park, Yoshi's Island, Waluigi Stadium, but bar this jump at the very end, this track is surprisingly doable. Koopa Cape, Rosalina's Ice World, Bowser Castle Tree, Ashen's Dash, Rome Avanti, Vancouver Velocity, LA Laps, Boo Lake, Twomp Ruins, and finally GBA Mario Circuit. This one I was considering letting slide because the jump isn't huge, but then you get off the anti-gravity section and that jump is pretty big, so you probably just die. The next slightly shorter category is tracks that have a glider ramp that would kill you. So this is slightly different to me because of the distance of the jump. Typically in a glider ramp, the jump will be further because obviously you're gliding instead of jumping and doing a trick. So I thought I'd put these into a separate category, even though there's not that many of them. There's only 10. Electrodrome, Cheap Cheap Beach, Royal Raceway, Bone Dry Dunes, Hyrule Circuit, Animal Crossing, Choco Mountain, Sky High Sundae, Alpine Pass, or Rock Mountain if you're in America, Sydney Sprint, and Amsterdam Drift. The final main category that I decided to split things into is courses that have cannons, because there's actually a lot of courses with cannons in Mario Kart that when you think about it. And these could kill you for multiple reasons. So you could think of them as a jump, where if you don't get shot out of the cannon and you fall off to your death and you die. You could think of it as if you get shot out of the cannon, you'd die due to just the G-force of being shot out of a fucking cannon. So there's a lot of reasons that these would just kill you. So that's why I'm just putting it into its own category. And there's only 8 tracks in this category. So there's Sweet Sweet Canyon, Waluigi Pinball, DK Snowboard Cross, or DK Summit, which is the superior name, Singapore Speedway, Maple Treeway, which honestly, cannon aside, this would be one of my favorite tracks to do a driving test on. Like, the vibes in this track are just really, really good. DK Mountain and Rainbow Road Wii specifically. And finally, there's tracks that are disqualified for miscellaneous reasons, and there's only 2 tracks in this, which I couldn't really fit into any other category. And those are Coconut Mall for this escalator, which I don't think you would actually be able to drive any real car up realistically. And then also Bowser's Castle for just having lasers at the very start of the track. Like you're dying if you try to drive through there. There's a myriad of reasons Bowser's Castle fails. Like you have the giant Bowser statue, you have a ton of spike balls, and you've lasers at the very start. So that goes into its own category. Whew, okay. That was a lot of courses. 63 in fact, so we have 63 courses here out of the 96 in the game, including all the DLC, that have been eliminated here due to different reasons. So I put them all on the tier list here so it's easier to see what has been eliminated for what, because Jesus, that was a lot of courses to go through. That leaves us with 33 courses that I think would actually be feasible enough for a driving test, which was more than I thought originally, to be fair. So we're going to dive into each of these individually. Some of them I'll talk about a bit more because I think they're more feasible, and some I'll knock off quite quickly because there is 1 or 2 reasons where I think, yeah, no, I wouldn't want to do my driving test here. This just kind of sucks. But as far as a high-level overview goes, we have 5 tracks that you just couldn't drive up at all, so you'd fall off. 5 tracks that you'd fall off and die. 4 tracks that you'd have to go underwater and so your car would just break down. 29 tracks, the majority, that just would fucking kill you. Like, you'd just take a jump and you'd splash and your car would go boom and you'd explode probably. 11 glider ramps that would kill you. I actually originally thought 10, but I forgot about Sydney Sprint. And then 7 courses with cannons that would either, I don't know, blow you up or you'd fall out of, or just a ton of different reasons you could die. And then 2 being Coconut Mall and Bowser's Castle for just kind of random reasons. Like, you can't drive up the escalator in Coconut Mall, and I don't want to drive in Bowser's Castle because that is definitely a high danger hazard. So with that, let's move on to the 33 remaining courses. We've reached the final 33 courses, and this is where I'm gonna kind of have to get a bit nitpicky and have my opinion shine through here more than just objective, this is going to kill you or this is impossible to drive on, because we still have a third of the courses left in the game. And for some of these, there's reasons I have that I personally wouldn't want to drive on them, but this is definitely more opinionated in this section. So let's get into first the ones I think that would be kind of uncomfortable to drive on. So you might be wondering why I didn't include like the 4 other Rainbow Roads in just the fucking you're going to die category. And that's because if you're in space, there's obviously less gravity, which means I feel like a lot of these jumps would be actually possible to do, maybe? I mean, I know no one sent a car up into space yet and tried driving it around, but I was letting them slide for that reason. However, I think they'd all be pretty uncomfortable. Rainbow Road Wii U, you have a lot of twists and turns that just would probably make you sick. You've Twomps in SNES Rainbow Road. N64 Rainbow Road, you have chain jumps eating the track and jumping around, and that just makes the track wobble, and that seems kind of like it would make you sick. 3DS Rainbow Road, you do drive on the moon, and that's really cool, but same reason for the other Rainbow Roads, I feel like it just wouldn't be comfortable to drive on. Sherbetland and Snowland both fail for being too cold. I don't think I'd like to drive on those tracks because it would be way too cold, and also because you'd have less traction driving on ice. Similarly, Dry Desert, Sunset Wilds, and Calamari Desert all kind of fall under the same reason for failing, which is that you'd have less traction if you're driving on kind of desert, dirt, sand roads, and also it would be way too warm. And your car would be way too warm, and I just don't want to do a driving test if I get a headache from being too warm. Daisy Cruiser, I feel driving on a cruise ship when it's actively moving would be very like motion sick inducing. If the cruise ship wasn't moving and it was like docked somewhere in the actual like racetrack itself, if it was docked somewhere, I would give it more. I would probably let it through, but the fact that the tables like sway from side to side and everything clearly means there's a lot of like movement going on, and that would just be very uncomfortable. Neo Bowser City, this one is literally just failing because it's raining, and having to deal with window wipers is just another thing to worry about during your driving test. I know that's very nitpicky, but it is just an extra thing that you don't need to worry about in any of the other racetracks that have made it through. None of them have rain in them. Bangkok Rush, this one actually was pretty good, except for at the very start of the racetrack, you drive through very, very shallow water, so it wasn't enough to like break down your car, but it's definitely enough that you'd lose traction and it'd be uncomfortable to drive through and just not a fun time overall. Excite Bike Arena, this one actually seems really fun, except if you get one of the really, really steep bumps, you're just going to have to be driving really slow over like up it and then down it, and it just seems kind of unfun, and bar that it's just a semicircle, so it just doesn't seem very comfortable to drive. Moving on to the tracks that are kind of unsafe, but they're only unsafe if you mess up and hit something that makes them unsafe, if that makes sense. So Moonview Highway has literal bomb cars, and I know crashing in a driving test is very bad and you'll probably get injured, but crashing into a bomb that blows up the entire surrounding area is slightly worse to me. TikTok Clock has a lot of moving components, and while I do think you might be able to drive it in real life, given that a lot of the jumps and stuff aren't very big, I think particularly the section at the end with the red and blue cogs that you drive over would be very, very uncomfortable and kind of unsafe to drive with a real car. Peach Gardens is actually a really nice track I probably would want to do my driving test on. If they rolled in the chain chomps and put them inside the castle somewhere, it would be a totally fair track to drive on. The only reason that this is failing is because of the chain chomps. Similarly, Mario Circuit has piranha plants that spit out fire at you, and that's pretty dangerous. Now, you can avoid them, but again, it's another thing you don't want to be worrying about on your driving test, so it's going to fail for that reason. Super Bell Subway is a really good one because this track I think you could totally drive, and it would be totally fine to do if the subway wasn't actually active. So you have a ton of trams coming in and out of the subway, and that just kind of messes you up, you know? It's not the same as traffic because the subways obviously have right of way, so you're kind of screwed there. So I'm putting this in the kind of unsafe category. You could drive it, but I personally would not want to. So these 4 courses are all tour courses, and they all drive on the right side of the road, and because I'm Irish, I drive on the left side of the road. So these are simply being disqualified because you would have to drive on the right side of the road, which is something I am very much not used to. Even though, personally, Berlin Byways would be an amazing track to do your driving test on, I think. You have a nice small amount of traffic, you have roundabouts, and it's just a nice pleasant drive overall. But because in Germany they drive on the right side of the road, I would not be able to do my driving test there. I would just probably fail immediately. So those 4 courses, being New York Minute, Berlin Byways, Tokyo Blur, and Madrid Drive, all failed simply just for driving on the right side of the road. Not their fault, that's just how it is. So, for the final contenders, we have 11 tracks. Yoshi Circuit, Moo Moo Meadows, Toad Harbor, Toad's Turnpike, Yoshi Valley, Shroom Ridge, SNES Mario Circuit Tree, Baby Park, Tour London Loop, 3DS Toad Circuit, and Daisy Circuit. And there is a track here that stands out to me as being the best for a driving test. But I feel like all of these tracks you could feasibly do your driving test on. So out of all these 11 tracks, the one I would most want to take my driving test on is Yoshi Circuit. So Yoshi Circuit is a very flat track, which is good. It has a lot of turns, which is good for practicing turn maneuvers and reversing maneuvers around corners. And there's also a city, a little town at the very start of the track that literally has a petrol station. Like, you can just, if your car runs out of fuel, you can refuel there. I don't think there's any other track in Mario Kart that actually has a place to refuel your car. So for those reasons, I think Yoshi Circuit is actually the best track you can take your driving test on. Now, there is piranha plants, but they're really not an issue if you stay on the road. They're only an issue if you go off-road or go very close to off-road. And because I'm in Ireland and I drive on the left side of the road, I'm totally fine with that. Now that we've clarified that Yoshi Circuit is in fact the winner, I want to go through the other runner-ups and explain why I think they haven't won, but why they could if you twist things a little bit. So, Moo Moo Meadows. Moo Moo Meadows is definitely the runner-up. It's just my second favorite track for doing a driving test on. It's a nice flat track. There is a couple bumps and curves and stuff, but nothing insane. The only real obstacle you have to worry about is cows crossing the road, and it's not actually that bad if you're driving at a reasonable pace. It's a good obstacle to check your reaction time, to check your braking time, and to check your awareness of the surrounding road, so I think this is actually a really good one. Toad Harbor, the reason this one fails is because of the trams, and the trams just kind of don't care about you. Like, they won't stop for you, they'll continue going, they can crash into you. Even if you stop, the trams in Toad Harbor don't stop. So if you stop in front of a tram, it will not stop for you, it will just crash into you. And sometimes that's not your fault, but they don't care. Toad's Turnpike. This one is pretty good because all the traffic drives in the same direction, but I feel like it's just a bit boring because it's essentially just an 8. So you're just doing constant, like, right-hand turn, left-hand turn. It's nothing special. It will be a good one to do, but it's nothing amazing. Yoshi's Valley. This one passes only because there's a cannon in it, but you don't have to take the cannon. So there is one route you can take that's a pretty normal driving route and feels pretty fair and safe to drive, bar the giant egg at the end, but I'm going to let that slide. It's not going to be the number one, but I'm going to let it in the contenders because it's very easy to avoid that egg, I feel like. Shroom Ridge is another good one. This feels like a good city track to be driving in. There's no insane obstacles. It's all just cars that are driving the same direction as you. There's some good opportunities for overtaking and moving lanes and stuff like that. So I think this one's actually a pretty good one. The only reason I'm not putting it as the winner is really because I don't like this track as much as some other people do. It's a fine track, but I just don't like it as much as some other people do. And that's literally it. Mario Circuit Tree. This one's a very flat track with some good turns, but there's no traffic, so that's not a realistic driving situation. And there's oil spills all over the track. Now these are kind of easy to avoid, but it can catch you out. So this one's not, I wouldn't even call it kind of unsafe because there's obstacles on real life roads you have to avoid, but I'd say it's just a bit boring to do. Baby Park is kind of a similar reason. I love Baby Park, but in a real life scenario, it is just an oval and it's just right-hand turns. If you did this in a driving test, you would never have to do a left-hand turn. You would just be doing right-hand turns constantly. And I feel like that's not a good driving test. Tour London Loop. This one, I actually don't know why I failed this. I'm not a huge fan of this track. It's an alright track, it's good. I feel like you could drive around here realistically. It's just not one of my favorite tracks. So because of that, I just wouldn't want to drive it in real life. So that's why it's an absolute contender. And all of these ones in this category are 100% contenders that I could drive, I feel like. And anyone could drive in real life. But London Loop just doesn't do it for me. Toad Circuit is very similar. It's a very boring track. When the Booster Course Pass came out, we were all complaining about how bad it looked and how basic it was for a track. But if you think about it, it's a pretty good track to do a driving test on. There's one glider ramp and it's totally optional, and there's a good few turns, and there's not really any obstacles to get in your way. It's just a nice pleasant drive with a couple turns and nothing to really get in your way. But it's kind of boring at the same time. I feel like it's too safe, if that makes sense. The final contender is Daisy Circuit, and this is actually a really good one. This would probably be in my like 5th or 6th favorite slot, but Daisy Circuit just has a couple things that make me not like it. There's some like railing, well, not railing, but there's a footpath you can kind of drive up at the side. There's 2 huge boost panels that you can't really avoid unless you go on the wrong side of the road, for me. So I don't know, this one's okay, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. So if I was to rank the 11 courses that I put in as contenders, Yoshi Circuit would definitely be first. Moo Moo Meadows would be second. I think I'd actually put Troom Ridge third. I just don't like this track as much as other tracks. Toad Harbor, I'm going to move down. Yoshi's Valley, I think I'll move up actually, because this is a pretty good track. It's just the egg at the end makes it very unsafe. Daisy Circuit, I'm going to put just below Yoshi Valley. And I think this is a pretty good ranking for my top 11 tracks. So Yoshi Circuit is definitely first, and Moo Moo Meadows is definitely my second favorite. All the rest I kind of put up in runner-up. This isn't necessarily ordered, it's semi-ordered, I guess, but the first 2 are definitely ordered. So Yoshi Circuit and then Moo Moo Meadows. So there you have it. Those are the objectively best tracks to take your driving test on in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Thanks for watching.